the purpose of networking is to build authentic connections with people. And I think that people think of it as a dirty word because it feels like you're just like using people or you want something from them and that's the only reason that you're connecting with them, which is a terrible way to approach it. That's a terrible way to approach life, right? The richest lives, when people study happiness, they find that people with more connection and that spend more time talking to other people and interacting with other people tend to be a lot happier.
Hello and welcome to the Scuttlebutt Podcast. This show exists to uncover the stories and tactics from today's and history's greatest military veterans, all at the top of their craft. This show is for vets looking to expand their knowledge of unique industries and careers. It's for vets seeking personal and professional growth, and it's also for high-performing vets driven to succeed in life and business. If that's you, stick around. You're in the right place. I'm your host, Brock Briggs, and I'm committed each week to bringing you high-quality conversations so that you can learn and grow right alongside us. Today, I'm speaking with Brendan Aronson. Brendan is a former Marine Corps infantry officer and currently an associate at Context VC, as well as the co-founder of the Military Veteran. In this conversation, you're going to hear from the front lines of the vet transition space. Brendan talks through building a company exclusively aimed at transitioning vets, different business models they're pursuing, the pros and cons of B2B and B2C, why bootstrapping is right for most veteran entrepreneurs. In Brendan's work at the MilVet, they run in-person events for transitioning vets as well as placement into roles typically in service companies backed by private equity. We explore some of the traits he sees of the highest performing veterans and what leads to the most successful outcomes. We also talk about the science of networking, how to conduct effective outreach, and how to be a giver when you have nothing else to give. You can find this episode, as well as all other episodes, video versions, transcripts, and other written content to keep learning at scuttlebuttpodcast.co. Please enjoy this conversation with Brendan Aronson. Okay, so you were just talking to me about launching this digital community. I have to hear about this. This is like the perfect adjacent thing to a podcast and what you guys are doing. Why don't you talk me through the rationale? What is it that you're looking to accomplish, and maybe even why that was like needed, I guess, to begin with?
Yeah, it's a good question. First, appreciate you having me on the show today. I listened to a few episodes, really enjoyed it. You put a ton of time and effort into this, and it does not go unnoticed, especially from someone that runs a podcast. So congratulations and keep up the great work. With regards to the digital community, so we started a business called the MilVet about a year and a half ago. And we started by posting in-person events. So we host these career conferences, which are fantastic networking opportunities for transitioning veterans and veterans that are in the early stages of their business careers. And the format of the events is that we get panel discussions with industry experts. So we get panelists who are, call it like 5 to 30 years into their civilian business careers to come back and give some lessons learned for the attendees. The attendees range from students in undergrad and MBA programs to transitioning veterans. We do get a lot of officers that come to the events. And the rest of the population is like folks that are in the first 5 years of their civilian business careers who are looking to hear from a great group of speakers and network. And the number one piece of feedback that we get from attendees is that they're frustrated by being unable to connect with other attendees. Like, we haven't had a great process apart from sharing an email list, which is obviously not something that we want to do. So we recently rolled out, we are literally rolling it out today, actually. We've been setting it up for the last month or so, a digital membership platform. So it's basically a Reddit style forum where people can come if they've attended one of our career events, interact with one another, get a chance to meet and network with each other before the event and after the event. Plus, we're putting together a whole slew of digital content for folks that are coming to these events. For instance, in the weeks leading up to the event, we have how to maximize your time at an in-person career conference. We have weekly office hours for people that want to come and ask questions about their careers or want to learn more about a specific career path. And then we're getting expert speakers and panels assembled to come in and do a lot of what we do in person via a digital format so that we can reach more people. So we have a founder from the portfolio, the venture fund that I run or that I work at, who's coming in to talk about his startup, right? What's it like to raise capital? What's it like to launch a SaaS business? That'll be a fantastic event. So we're really looking forward to it. So it's an exciting time for sure at the Mill.
Super interesting. And I think you are getting at one of the most important parts of like the transition space that is just overlooked, at least from the DoD side of things, is hey, we're gonna throw all these tools and ram these down your throat, but you're missing the most important thing. It's, oh, I need to be able to connect with other people who are also going through this. And it's like just even having that peer accountability, being able to ask questions to people that are maybe further ahead, like at a traditional college experience, like where you're going through something difficult together, you're re-entering the civilian world together, but they don't really enforce that. And I think that's one of the pitfalls of TAPS, but that's a different conversation. So that's super cool that you guys are able to take the interest from if people are coming to an in-person event already, they're certainly going to be willing to want to like connect with everybody else there. And is that something that you guys are adding on top of? Is that an additional perk? Is that something that they will pay for on top of attending? How exactly are you laying that out?
Good questions. We're beta testing this to see how it goes with folks that have come to past events. So they're getting some additional value completely free. They're going to get some great digital programming as well. All of this free. And we're going to look to roll it out more broadly. We would have to charge for it, of course. Like it costs us money to put on, it takes us time and effort to be able to provide the digital content. So we'll see how the offer comes together in the coming months. I think we'll use the next 2 months basically to like trial and error and experiment to see what is the highest value things that we can offer to this group of people and then go from there when we design a package. So I think there's a couple applicability or applicable potential customers, folks that want to build their network, of course, but also if you think about more holistically, there are employee resources groups at almost every company in the United States, right? Getting a veterans affinity group started can be really challenging. We're actually in the process of writing a book about how to do that best for companies, and they're so important. It is critically important to have a group of people that you can rely on to learn your new workplace culture. So being able to offer this to ERG leaders as a way to supplement or augment the programming that they're putting on for their employees, I think is going to be a really powerful tool for their toolkit as well.
What platform are you guys using to host the digital experience? And then what are you guys looking at in terms of how you'll measure whether it's successful or not?
Yeah, great question. We're using a platform called Circle, which is like a Reddit style forum. So it's asynchronous communication as opposed to something like Slack or Discord, which is like obviously real time. So I think, we have so many different communication tools. The number of channels I monitor is painful, right? Between different social media channels, email, text, Slack, it's just like one thing after the next. So I like the asynchronous format because people can reference back to past conversations if they have a similar question. And then there's some additional functionality built into the tool that allows us to coordinate things like office hours, happy hours. You can like live stream through the platform. We'll probably continue to host most of those meetings on Zoom, frankly, but it does seem like good functionality. So yeah,
That's super exciting and a huge step and something in the early stages of a company, you have to experiment so much and just be willing to go out on a limb, see if it's going to be something that people want, and then be willing to adapt and change. I'm excited to see how that kind of meets the needs of like your guys' audience and customers. That so I'm going to be keeping tabs on that, and I'm excited. Like I said, I think it would be best. Why don't you take a couple minutes and get us up to speed about why you're working on this community in the first place? Give me like the 2 to 3 minute overview of your life and what gets you here today.
sure. So I'm Brendan Aronson. I'm originally from Baltimore, went to the Naval Academy for undergrad, and then I was an infantry officer in the Marine Corps for 6 years. So I was in charge of a platoon, did a deployment overseas to Okinawa, and then I was assigned to an advisor unit in Iraq in 2016. So spent almost the whole year there. It was very different than historic advisor deployments to Iraq. We were advising at a pretty high level with the Iraqi army while they were fighting against ISIS and helping to coordinate support from our coalition partners who had aircraft overhead basically 24/7. This was when ISIS controlled everything up to the edge of Baghdad. So it was a really interesting time to be there. Came home, I was actually supposed to get out 6 months after I got back from Iraq, but I ended up deferring graduate school for a year. I had a really bad back injury that I was working through at the time, and that extra year actually gave me a ton of opportunity to transition a little bit more deliberately. So in that year, I was volunteering at a nonprofit called Service to School, which has helped thousands of veterans matriculate in higher ed. The organization was founded by a guy named Tim Shaw, who is now my business partner at the MilVet. Tim was a West Point grad, Army infantry guy. And basically, 10 years ago, there were zero undergraduate student veterans at any of the nation's top 30 schools because a lot of them did not accept transfer students. So we worked with the schools to create a candidate pipeline coming from community colleges. And today there's 80 to 100 student veterans at these different undergraduate universities, which is obviously a great outcome. I worked on the MBA side of the house, so helped a bunch of folks get into MBA programs, helped link them up with students in schools to help them make that transition and prepare a better application. So we've helped thousands of folks through that nonprofit. And then it allowed me to, that gap year or that deferral year gave me some more time to line up some interviews before my MBA program as well. So I basically extended in the Marine Corps through like March of the subsequent year, went and did an internship at Goldman Sachs in New York doing investment banking, which was a great program, very interesting experience. Finance, I think, is like fascinating. I think it could have been a really interesting career path. Really enjoyed that internship. I went to Wharton, and so I showed up on campus in August of 2018. And in the first 6 weeks of school, while I was trying to get acclimated, my father passed away very unexpectedly, which was devastating. We were very close. He was a tremendous mentor and friend and advisor, and really shaped a lot of how I viewed the rest of my life and career. His passing taught me that we just don't have as much time on this earth as we think that we do, and that it's really important to prioritize relationships and to be doing the things that we want to do day to day. He used to always make sure that we took time to carve out time for like deliberate fun. And, so I go back to Goldman the next summer for another internship and just came to the conclusion that I know I want to launch a business at some point. I don't know how long I'm going to be on this earth for. And so it's time to take a bet on myself. So declined a full-time offer to return to the firm after that summer, and then started launching startups in my second year at Wharton. My first startup idea was dead on arrival. It was, frankly, in retrospect, a terrible idea. I'm very glad that it didn't end up going anywhere because it would have been very painful, and like just the business model itself would not have worked. That startup was basically dead on arrival. And in my second semester at Wharton, I was reconnecting with an old friend who I'd grown up with, who was also a Marine officer, who had launched a company called Paint True. And so Paint True was an art company that took people's favorite photos and had them expertly hand painted by a professional artist. You can tell I've given that pitch before.
A couple
The
times.
more than once for sure. And they make really nice gifts for special occasions, like people would have their wedding photos painted or graduation photo. They would paint for every big life moment that you can imagine. We painted something for a customer to commemorate that special memory. It was an incredible business to be a part of. I mentioned JD Kameen, who was one of the original co-founders, and Eric Katani, who was a naval officer as well, played in the NFL for a few years. Eric's one of the smartest business people I've ever met, and he has a tenacious work ethic. I learned an absolute ton from working on that business. It was a consumer facing business, obviously. We did do some B2B selling for businesses that needed artwork for their walls and raised a little bit of capital for it as well. And then worked on it for 2 years, 2 and some change years. And ultimately, we got to a point where we didn't believe that raising additional capital was in the best interest of the company. And so we had to get it profitable, right? You have to run a business profitably so that you don't run out of cash if you're not able to fundraise. And I was trying to figure out what to do next in my life. And I think that this theme of transition has been obviously very important to my professional life. It's important to all veterans, but we really do become professional transitioners. People will change careers a number of times throughout their professional life. And so mastering the art of transitioning from one phase into the next, I think, is actually a skill set that you can build. So I did the only thing I knew how to do, which was pick up the phone and call as many people as possible. They call it networking. I think people have a false connotation about what networking is, which I'm happy to get into. But I reconnected with a lot of old friends and mentors. And Tim, who's my current business partner, had just hosted a startup event in San Francisco, which was amazing. It was fantastic for bringing together the community. And Tim was an investor in my first business as well, and basically said to me, I think that there's a better way that we can help folks solve this transition problem. And he's like an in-person events junkie. So he was like, let's put on a conference for transitioning vets. I think it'll be really valuable. And so we started with one conference in New York City in the summer of 2022 and built on that momentum over the last year and some change to get us to where we are today. Today, we have a couple of different revenue streams. I'm happy to dive into it, but that's a fairly long-winded background. So let me pause there and see what questions or reactions you might have.
Not quite under the 3 minutes, but that's okay. That gives me a ton of context, and I appreciate that. I want to rewind a little bit. We're gonna talk startups, we're gonna talk venture, we're gonna get into all of that. Wanna touch on something you said earlier on in that spiel about yourself. You were talking about vets being professional transitioners. I wanna unpack that a little bit. One of the things that I find extremely interesting about that word. It's something you hear a lot. It's something at the forefront. It's the right at the front of the dictionary and like the veterans vocabulary. What's interesting to me is that it's like a surprise, but it shouldn't be. And I've just have really wrestled with the fact that when we join the military, there's an expiration date on that, whether it be 4 years or 20, it is a known thing that is coming. But for some reason, we struggle so hard, or we just as a population struggle so hard, and we act like it sneaks up on us, but it's actually something that is embedded. It's not it's part of it. It's part of life. However, how we handle that is maybe just not that great. So, having gone through it yourself, and then now working with vets on a very literally a daily basis doing that, what has been come to be like your understanding about what that word means, and why is it a bigger deal or not as big of a deal as people make it to be?
It's a great question. Transitioning from one career to another is challenging for everyone. I think we're obviously especially sensitive to it because we know so many veterans and all of them go through this transition, and it's challenging. I struggled mightily through the transition, and some of that was self-inflicted, others were just like external forces dealing with grief. But yeah, moving from one phase of a career to another is really challenging. Veterans are not the only ones that go through it. I see a lot of my business school classmates go through it even now, and they have done this over and over again in a civilian context. So it is challenging. You mentioned a few things. First is that we're so ill prepared for it. It is really wild. Like I think about the training that I had to become a Marine. I spent some time in at the Naval Academy, right? That was a few years where you're being indoctrinated in the culture, and then a year and some change training to become an infantry officer, and then additional follow on formal schools. And then the TAPS program is like literally 3 days, right? It was five, and I validated two of them because I was into school already. And it was like the advice that they were giving was like, one size fits nobody. It was not helpful. They taught us that networking was adding people on LinkedIn, like randomly. That's not networking. Like, you're not establishing a relationship with someone. I think the DoD has a lot of work that it can do to improve the transition process. There are organizations that are actually looking at this problem. There's a nonprofit called Life Skills for Soldiers that is about financial readiness for active duty troops. A guy named Brendan Dubner started that organization. It's basically empowering like a train the trainer model for people to be able to teach their soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines and Guardians now how to manage their finances, which I think is like helpful in the transition. But ultimately, it is a personal journey. And what makes it so challenging is that you are reinventing yourself. For years, right? I would introduce myself and people would say, "Oh, what do you do?" I'd say, "I am a Marine." Like that is my identity. And so there's this process of finding a new purpose and mission, which is extremely challenging. That's part of it. Second is the educational piece, right? You just don't know anything about civilian careers. Like, what do these different words mean? What is the difference between a vice president, a director, an associate partner, or an associate? Like, you just have a whole new vernacular to learn. Understanding different industries is its own challenge. So a lot of folks get out and they're like, what industry do I even go into? And they don't know. Some industries actually deliberately complicate their jargon. This is especially true in finance. So one of the reasons that financial products are priced in a very opaque way is that they're just like the naming and vernacular and like understanding of finance that you have to understand what's going on in the industry is almost deliberately complicated. Some people would say it is deliberately complicated. So, yeah, there's just a lot of different moving parts to any transition. And so many of them are personal that it is very challenging for everybody to go through it. I would say that to have a successful transition, there's a lot of things that you can do to tee yourself up in advance. Basically, a lot of it comes down to making friends and educating yourself. You can listen to a podcast like this one and have hundreds. I know you're coming up on 100 episodes. Congrats. You can have 100 of these career conversations and hear about what people are doing in their civilian careers at the push of a button on your drive to and from work. And you're picking up little bits of civilian business culture along the way, right? So that's a really helpful thing. But at some point, you have to make it a two-way street and let other people know that you exist. And that's like the art of networking, right? That's building a group of friends, mentors, advisors, and a civilian business tribe that is absolutely critical to your business success.
I like what you said about putting the weight on the service member, about taking the responsibility and the initiative because other people aren't going to do it for you. And I've the last few years, and a lot of this is still residual from my exit of the military. At one point, I was very angry at the service for I felt ill equipping me to leave. That position has been flipped on its head a little bit when I came to realize that I wasn't taking that initiative and I could have done that better. And that's something that I end up talking to and trying to reinforce and mentoring and talking to people who are getting ready to leave. It's look, nobody's coming to do this for you. And that's why bringing up that thing I said earlier about you have a known exit date. Like day one, you should be starting to think about what is coming next because you can't really ever fully get there, but you can start to think about it and be consuming content and be looking for that. The weight of the military lifestyle, I think, makes that extremely difficult. But I know that, at least speaking for myself only, I wish that I had been taking more initiative to do that, and I probably wouldn't have tripped so hard on the way, tripped so hard over my DD-214 to get out.
It is a natural human psychological tendency that when things are hard, you look for external forces to blame. I had the exact same reaction, like most people I know do. And it's true, like the services do poorly equip people for making that transition. But that said, like all of life and business, especially, it's always hard, but it becomes a lot easier when you have a growth mindset and you say to yourself, I might not know the answers to whatever it is that I'm doing right now, but I will learn them over time. And I am ultimately accountable and responsible for my own learning. That makes all of it a lot easier. And yeah, I think having that sense of accountability and ownership over the problem instead of looking away, like that's another natural human psychological tendency. It's like something is really hard or painful to look at. So I look away. That's why people don't plan their finances too. You just got to look this ugly baby straight in the face and say, this is going to be painful and that's okay. I'm just going to have to become a better version of myself. And I believe I'm capable of that. So
When we first initially talked, you had told me that there is a literal science to networking. And you had this quote from your LinkedIn I really liked. Networking is the art of making friends, helping them, and being open to allowing them to help you. It's about creating authentic relationships and forging trust with people. So, networking is something that everybody says you should do. You mentioned that it's not just sending a LinkedIn request. Why don't you break down this science for me? And obviously you are very well connected and have used that to your advantage in everything that we've talked about so far. So what are maybe start with what is it that you think it is and then what do people most do wrong when it comes to that networking, the dirty ugly word?
yeah, I mean, there's this like old saying that your network is your net worth, which I think is silly. And not everything is transactional. You can build authentic relationships with people in business with no interest in selling to them. Like it's very common. And I think that look, the science of networking, there is actually quite a bit of research about how to build an effective network. There are strong ties. These are the people that are like your inner circle, right? I bet you could list off 5, 10 people that you talk to on a weekly or every other week basis, right? Family, your closest friends, etc. And then there are weak ties, folks that you've interacted with in the past. You haven't kept in as good touch with them, but you still consider yourself friendly with them and you would help them if you were able to, or you knew that they needed help. So there is a fair bit of research about how people build networks, the value of strong and weak ties. Interestingly, people tend to have more valuable networks when they have a lot of weak ties, which I thought was interesting. So there is an actual science behind it people can look into. I would say the purpose of networking is to build authentic connections with people. And I think that people think of it as a dirty word because it feels like you're just like using people or you want something from them and that's the only reason that you're connecting with them, which is a terrible way to approach it. That's a terrible way to approach life, right? The richest lives, when people study happiness, they find that people with more connection and that spend more time talking to other people and interacting with other people tend to be a lot happier. It is not that's not a good strategy for approaching networking, is thinking of it in terms of I need something from this person. I try and think of it because it's so awkward and difficult to overcome. I try and encourage veterans to think of it actually in the opposite way. It's like, how will expanding my network help the people that I care about? And how can I help this person that I'm going to connect with in the future? It's really hard when you're transitioning because you're just not sure what value you are able to provide. And it's terrifying to ask people for help because it's like uncomfortable and you don't want to be judged as someone that's incapable of doing it for themselves, etc. But there is a whole There are tons of people that have gone through this transition that want to help you. And so I think during the transition specifically, while it's challenging to think about the value that you provide to them, I promise that you'll provide a ton of value over the course of your business career. There were, hundreds of people who helped me through my transition and asked me for nothing in return. They did it because they knew how painful it was. And now, 7, 8 years later, I've put some of them into new roles and new opportunities and helped them find their next job, right? And helped some of them raise capital for their startups. And they had no idea that this schmuck Marine that they were talking to about an internship was going to be able to help them in the future. They just did it because they were authentic and they wanted to be helpful. And to me, that is just one example of how I think veterans can think about networking during their transition is you will be able to help these people in the future. Where do people go wrong? Again, it comes back to being authentic. Like you are trying to forge a legitimate relationship with someone. That includes like getting to know them, right? Getting to know about what their goals are, what they would like out of their career in the future, what they do day to day. People do it wrong when they are not authentic. I see a lot of just like faux pas on LinkedIn. So people will either just send you a connection request without taking a moment to write the notes section under a connection request as to like why it makes sense to connect. Some people are open connectors and they'll just accept everyone. Other people will not connect with people that they don't know. I can talk about why that is if that's of interest. But and then when you get someone, basically the goal is ultimately when you're reaching out to new people, you would like to get a phone call with them if possible, right? That allows you to build like an actual authentic relationship. And I see people make mistakes when they don't do any due diligence ahead of time. They'll just come into it cold, and either have no ask at all or be wholly unprepared on the other person's background, which can be frustrating, especially if people are busy. So certainly do your homework beforehand. Write out some questions. You should come prepared to that conversation. Think of it almost like a podcast where Brock brings people on, he interviews them, he lets them talk quite a bit. That's basically the goal of you having a networking call. You want the other person to be able to tell you as much as possible so that you can learn from their experience. Sometimes you'll find people that are just looking primarily to talk. I have had this happen. This was a part of the interview process at Wharton. I was interviewing a candidate who literally the opportunity was for him to ask questions of a current student. And he talked for the entire 15 minutes, like not a single question, just talked at me. And so I was curious. I was like, what is the point of this conversation if you're not trying to learn about what it's like at the school? And I've seen that in other contexts as well. So that's another faux pas. Not following up with a thank you email, just take a few minutes. Follow up with a thank you email, reference something specific from the conversation. It's a nice touch. I'll tell you, if you want to operate at like the varsity or like D1 level, send someone a handwritten note. It's like a little over the top. I know off the top of my head the people that have brought handwritten notes to our in-person events. I will never forget them. It's a really powerful way to do it. So you just want to think about like how you can be thoughtful in the relationship and invest in it, knowing that it's going to be hopefully a relationship that you'll have for decades to come. And maybe sometimes it will have to do with business. I certainly, when we launched our company, the first people that we reached out to as potential sponsors for our events were people that we knew. They knew us, they trusted us, we had a warm relationship. So, yeah, there's an opportunity to do business, but more holistically, you just want to be helpful to other people too. And it just makes life more fun and interesting to meet as many people as you can. Hopefully, this is a kick in the ass for some folks to reach out to some new people, make some new friends. Those will be valuable relationships more holistically in your life. And then they have a business application as well. So it is an absolutely critical task that never goes away in your business career.
That was so well said, and I appreciate how you took that idea of networking and flipped it on its head, and I think maybe to put in a different set of words, people should be showing up to the door of people that they want to meet with something to give them, even if you don't have something to give, and I think that if transitioning vets were to, even if it is on LinkedIn, maybe it's in person, find those people that you think could be helpful and then asking them how you can help them. Even if you can't do anything, people that are super successful in their business career know that you will not be able to probably do anything for them. However, the fact that you asked means so, so much. And it shows that you are like coming across and thinking about somebody other than yourself, which in turn makes them more willing to do something for you. And then maybe later on, maybe you are able to do something for them. And then then you've got them in your pocket for life, and not in a scary, a rude, selfish way, but like in a way that you have secured a great relationship. And there's that whole like reciprocity idea of like when somebody does something for you, you owe them whether or not you actually do or not. But it goes a long ways. And I think that I think if I were doing it again, I don't write this down actually, but in my head, I keep a list of when I meet somebody new, hey, what is this person working on? And then when it comes time, when you come across a new opportunity, sending them a note, even if it's not helpful at the time, hey, I thought of you and maybe this would be interesting to you, or I met this other person. That kind of stuff just goes so far with people. It's unbelievable.
For sure. Can I ask you a question?
Please. Oh, I
I
love when people turn the tables on me. Okay, there we go.
yeah, I wanted to be more of a conversation, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
hit
have you read there's a great book called Give and Take by Adam Grant. Have you heard of this book or read it?
I have not. No.
Brock, check out the book. I think you'll like it.
Give and take. Okay.
Yeah, if you're listening, check out the book. It basically is an argument as to why you should be a giver. There's a spectrum of ways that people interact with other people. There are givers, pure givers, just think of only giving to others. And then pure takers are like people that are very self interested and only looking to extract value from a situation. And I think that people think about business people as there's like this caricature of a business person being someone that's greedy potentially or someone that's a taker. And the funny truth about it is that it's actually the exact reverse. People that give more actually tend to be more successful in their careers and professions. And you can get burned from being just giving. It's not exclusively because of that reciprocity principle where you might just give someone a favor and then they're unwilling to help you in return. Those kinds of things are guaranteed to happen. But for the people that give more than they receive, they tend to actually be much more successful in their business careers. It's an interesting book, and there's some interesting anecdotes in it about folks that are givers in their business careers. But if you approach networking with a giver mentality of, hey, I want to connect with this person because I know that this is a person that could potentially help me down the road. They have a career that I would like to emulate. Maybe they'll be a great mentor. Maybe they'll become a friend. But you go into it with the perspective of, and you should do that, right? You should target the folks that you're reaching out to deliberately because we become more like the people that we spend time with. But if you approach the relationship from the perspective of giving, then you will come out with more than fantastic results, right? It's a better way to approach life to be a giver. I think it ties back into something that you said at the beginning about folks being competitive and not recognizing that there's more than enough pie for everybody. And so you do want to approach it from that giver mentality. I think that can help some people overcome their fears of networking, which is someday I will be able to help this person and I'm going to make it my mission to do. So I think that's a helpful thing to keep in mind. I just want to call out one more quick faux pas. Another thing that people will do is sometimes they'll fail to respect the double opt-in intro. So they'll reach out to someone and say, they'll be on the call with someone and be like, yeah, I actually know a guy that might be helpful for that. And then they'll connect those two people without asking permission first. Should always ask permission of the person who's going to receive the introduction of both parties. You want both parties to say, yes, I'm open to this connection. Because if you connect two people directly and you haven't gotten that permission, that's actually a faux pas that you might not know about. Is like you're putting more work on someone's plate and they're just getting it out of the blue and they're like, who is this person? So always ask permission before making connections to people in your network. Just another fun fact.
That's a good one. I like that. And I've never been personally burned by it before, but just hearing it, like there's definitely some situations you could be in where maybe somebody, especially somebody that's maybe more senior in their career, that is not looking to just have their email inbox exploited like that. It's people's inbox is sacred. You got to protect that.
For sure.
I appreciate the book recommendation. I'm definitely going to check this out. That giver mentality is super powerful. And I think that there's and the reason that it's powerful is because vets don't really maybe necessarily realize this if they haven't had a career outside of the service yet. In the service, it doesn't really happen. Like sometimes like networking will do something for you. More often than not, it doesn't. There's not really anything to be gained there. However, in the professional context, knowing more people will accelerate your career by 100x more than any certification, qualification, degree that will push you way further ahead knowing more people because they will be you've got this army of people who owes you on reciprocity, and or at least know that you're a good person and trying to reciprocate and be of value to people. That's something that you want working for you and not against you.
For sure. I would actually push back and say networking in the military is like a very dirty word and concept, but it's actually, I bet it would be remarkably helpful. I don't know if anyone's done this research, but imagine a promotion board that is looking at someone's promotion package and everybody in the room has served with that person versus everybody in the room doesn't know that person. Sometimes I think they blind the names sometimes in promotion boards, depending on the branch of service, but I do think it's probably helpful. The other thing that you mentioned that I think is relevant or important to note is that the number of people that you know, it is really important that people know about you and know what you're up to because they can't help you
Mhm.
if they don't. You can think of your ability to get lucky as like a surface area. I feel like I see this all the time on like Twitter, and I'd never come across it until I think I saw it from Sahil Bloom or someone like that. But it's a fantastic concept. It's brilliant. And it's basically the amount that you're likely to get lucky, right? Air quotes in your life is proportional to what you're working on and how well it scales, right? That's on one axis. And then on the other axis is the number of people that know that you are working on it. So an example of that is when you think about a job that scales, if you're in a job that doesn't necessarily scale, like some kind of like hourly role where no matter how much opportunity you have, you only have a limited number of hours, you can only get so lucky. Whereas some jobs and professions scale really nicely, right? Like a business, you can sell to more customers, right? Deploying capital, you can deploy more and more capital, right? And then on the other axis, when you think about the number of people that know you, I could do it. We could do an experiment. I could probably predict what your favorite movie that you've seen in theaters this year is, right? It's probably Barbie, Oppenheimer, maybe Spider-Man. I think there was a new Avengers movie, maybe. I'm like terrible with the superhero movies. Was it one of those?
Are you for me personally,
Yeah.
I actually haven't seen any of them. I don't even think I've been to the theater in 2023, but Oppenheimer looked good. We'll take that.
There's a very limited number of movies that it could have been, right? Like it can only be a handful of movies that were popular in the
Mhm.
United States. And I wasn't going to guess something that I didn't know about, right? Or that I had no idea existed or wasn't marketed well. And the same thing is true of opportunity. So if I'm looking to hire a chief of staff, right, I only know so many people, right? And something like 90% of jobs are through your own network. Like people find jobs through their network, through the people that they know. So if I don't know that you exist, I cannot help you. So if nobody knows that you exist, it can be a lot more challenging, which is why this active networking should be a deliberate concept that you apply in order to expand the number of people who know that you exist so that more people think about you and have the opportunity to plug you in on good opportunities.
I really love that thing from Sahil Bloom. There, it gets like, I'm not sure if he got this from him, but have you read the Almanac of Naval Ravikant?
It's on my
Oh,
bookshelf behind me. I have not read it.
okay. Oh, okay. You need to read that. Drop whatever you're
I've heard
reading
it's
right
good.
now and read that. It's also not the book in that format specifically, but there is a 3.5 hour podcast from him and his business partner, Nivi, called How to Get Rich Without Getting Lucky. And that's what that book is based off of. Shout out to Eric Jorgensen. That podcast talks about surface area of luck a lot, and it's how to the different types of luck, and which I think he took from somebody else, but a fantastic podcast and great book. You'll get a kick out of that.
I'll pick it up. I promise.
It's a super quick read. There's lots of pictures. It's a fun one.
Yeah, you had me at pictures. I'm a Marine, so that's very helpful for me.
I wasn't gonna make the dig, but if you did, then I'll tee you up for it. How much of where you think you are today has been a byproduct of a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about? A lot of the things that you guys are doing at your company now are leveraging in-person events, virtual events. What do you think about the differences of those, and then maybe how have those influenced where you're at right now?
I would say 100%. Like I think of myself as probably one of the most lucky human beings on the entire planet. To
You got
be
a lot of
fair,
surface area, you must.
yeah, to be fair, I actually think that most people born today are just like very lucky by virtue of war is actually deaths from war are at an all-time low, deaths from famine, disease, etc. So when you think about it in the broader context, like of course we're some of the luckiest people on the planet, but like myself especially, I know that I've had less to overcome than a lot of folks. And even given that, it's life is still hard. Like life is still hard for everybody. And I would say that the where I am today is 100% downstream of having established an effective network and like trying to be of service to other people. right? Like I met my business partner working at a nonprofit. Like I didn't work there thinking, oh, like this is someone I should know. I actually didn't even know that he existed when I joined the nonprofit. And we met and established like an authentic relationship based on shared values of helping other people, especially transitioning veterans, trying to help people get into school, and built a relationship off of that. And then when I was trying to figure out the next company that I would start in 2022, like again, the first thing I did was call everybody I know, like every person I knew, and I just asked them for their advice. What do I do? And a bunch of people gave me all kinds of advice, and you have to filter and sort through what is most important to you. And there were some job opportunities that actually shook out of that. People were like, yeah, we know you've been hustling and grinding on building this thing. We have an opening for a CEO role for another company here that could be interesting. Was in conversations with some folks at Google about openings that they had. And ultimately, I had to look at myself and say, am I ready to take a job, or am I staying in the arena? I'm sure I'll be better on the next one. And so, yeah, I would say 100% of it is downstream of that. And then we have the luxury of running a business where we get to help people, which is it's amazing. The dirty secret is I'd honestly do this for free. I don't say it too loudly, but I love it. It's so much fun to be able to help other people, and then we make money doing it. And for me, business really is my passion. Like I love it. I think everybody should have a great business career. I think everybody should have at least a passion that they enjoy, that they're able to use as like a tool for helping other people. And if you can tie that to your income, even better. So yeah, I would say 100% of it is downstream of the things that I'm trying to impart today on the show.
First off, congratulations because that is a such a great place to be in, doing something that you wouldn't have to be paid to do. There is just such a small fraction of people that could ever say something like that. And one, what a privilege, but two, great that you recognize that and also are spurring people on to do that. Cause I agree. And I, in a similar position and wholeheartedly want people to be pursuing pitch it as business, but a lot of people are like, "Oh, I'm not interested in business." It's how can you not be? Like, there's something that you are uniquely suited for that is upstream of business in some capacity, and, like, having an appreciation for what business is, I think, the key to the door that allows you to connect your passions with making a living. I think that's, like, the thing that is gets you to the next place, and you gotta have both. You gotta know, hey, this is actually my calling, or at least what I think it is right now, and then be able to understand, hey, how can I do this in a way that could put food on the table?
For sure. I think business is fascinating. There's just too much to learn about it. You can never get good enough. Like I expect that hopefully I'll live to 70 or 60 or something, and I suspect I'll sit there and say, "Damn, I just don't know enough. There's so
Mhm.
much more to learn," which is really daunting, but it's also that's what makes it so interesting and fun. There's not like one unique way to do things and to make money as a business or to impact the people that you want to impact. A friend of mine creates some content, and he wrote about or talked about like this idea of people that get into entrepreneurship as artists. So they have a craft or a trade that they want to practice, and maybe they'll start a business around it, right? And there is a segment of people for whom that is true. And then some of them move into another bucket where business itself becomes the art. Business itself becomes the thing that they're passionate and interested about. And that's me. Like I am interested in business. I find it fascinating and fun, and it's so hard. It is so hard to grow a business. It's very pain. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, full stop, which makes it so interesting and enjoyable because it's like you have to get up and just work and work really hard. And if the business doesn't do as well as you hope it will do, a lot of times you look around and you're like, who's to blame for this? And it's that's right. So I love that aspect of it. And I think that veterans are really well suited to have great careers in business. That's why we do what we do. Is I want to see more military veterans, CEOs, politicians. I think that they're service oriented people and that our society and country will be in a much better place when there are more veterans in these leadership and executive positions.
What do you think that you learned about business from your very first startup? You said that it was DOA. I would love to, and I originally was gonna ask about Paintrue some more, but you teed me up to ask about your didn't go into any detail, so naturally I need to pull on that string. What did you learn and get into as much or as little detail as required to explain that?
I think most of the lessons that I learned were actually in retrospect. I'm not sure I learned a ton of lessons in the moment, because of the fact that I spent too much time strategizing and not enough time doing, right? Like, people love to talk about business strategy, and I honestly think there are important elements of strategy, right? You should pick a market with real need, with customers that can pay you, a market that's growing ideally with tailwinds, etc. But like, most people get bogged down in the strategy and not in the doing part. And yeah, we spent way too much time on strategy and not enough time just doing. It was a subscription box idea that was like popular at the time. And frankly, like business school teaches you to how to build a venture backed startup instead of a bootstrapped business, which is a huge disservice to the students that go to those schools because you think that everything has to be venture backed when 99.9% of businesses are actually bootstrapped, including some of the most successful companies in the world. And yeah, I think I just came at it from the perspective of like venture scale first and then looked at other business models and was like, how can I apply these to a specific industry? But it was a bad idea because basically we were saying that we would help folks acquire customers and we would only take a small margin on every sale. So in that regard, it was like an affiliate play, but we had no distribution channels at all. So it's like we're going to be basically starting from scratch. And if you want to build a business that is just built on affiliate revenue, you have to have distribution channels. Like you've got to have a way to reach large numbers of people, right? You have to own some kind of channel. If we had an email list with 2 or 3 million people with that had the same interest and we were going to do affiliate sales off of that's like a valuable piece of intellectual property. It's an incredibly valuable asset that we would own that we could then make money on in that way by helping other people reach those same customers, right? But this was just like a stupid idea from the start, frankly. But yeah,
I wouldn't go so far as to say stupid, regardless of the outcome of it. It's a lesson, and I'm
for
sure
sure.
that greatly informs all of the business decisions that you've made since then.
100%. I would say the biggest business lesson that I've learned since graduating from B school is the value of distribution channels. Like I think about a business, anytime I get pitched by an entrepreneur, I think distribution first. Like, how are you going to reach these customers? Do you know them? Like, how well do you know them? What do they talk about? Where do they spend their time? Where do they get their information? Who do they trust? That lesson alone has been incredibly valuable. I think it's been built over like just painful efforts at marketing over the last few years. I've got another question for you. Have you read the book The Minimalist Entrepreneur by Sahil Levingia?
I've read parts of it. I am a big Sahil fan, though. What he's done with Gumroad and his from his time at Pinterest and stuff, he's very aspirational and enjoy his thought leadership.
Yeah, it's a great read. I really encourage people to pick it up. That book influenced me quite a bit, I think. I actually had a chance to meet Sahil at one of the Upfront Summit here in LA, which is like a startup and venture summit last year. He's actually going to be coming to an event that we host called the Military Veteran Startup Event in San Francisco in February. So if you want to hear from Sahil and you want to meet him, Brock, I hope you'll join us there. It's a great event. I would not admit this super publicly apart from on this podcast. I think it's probably the best event that we put on. So yeah, so distribution channels first is like a good lesson learned from some of those first startups.
How have you taken that distribution focus and then applied that to MilVet? And maybe actually, even before we get to that, maybe just talk about at a high level what the business is today, origins, and then how maybe you're focusing on distribution primarily.
Great question. So today we host these in-person networking events. We've got these career conferences that we put on. We talked about those a little bit earlier. Those are fantastic events, frankly, for anyone in the first 5 years of their business careers, or if you're about a year out from transition, come learn from our speakers. You'll meet some fantastic people. You'll also meet, this is not like a main selling point, but I actually think it's probably the most valuable thing that we do is you'll meet people who are going to be in parallel swim lanes with you for the next 30 years, like your fellow attendees. Like you will work with them. You will do business with them. People have met their co-founders at these events. They've raised capital at these events. They've gotten jobs, obviously, skill bridge internships. So we do those in-person networking events, and then we do placement. So we help companies hire military veterans. And just because of the folks that are in my network, we've largely specialized in placing veterans into executive roles. A lot of our clients are private equity owned businesses that are looking for strong leaders to come in and help run trades businesses. Veterans have exceptional leadership capacity. So we've helped those clients hire a bunch of military veterans to come in and run their businesses for them. We also think that's where we can make a big impact because the number one predictor of whether a company will hire veterans is the presence of a veteran on the executive team. So we think we can have an outsized impact by focusing there as well. We've helped some venture-backed startups hire their first employees. And then we talked at the beginning of the conversation about the digital membership that we're launching soon. That's what we do with the business day to day. And then how we implemented the distribution channel first approach This business, I love this business. I have so much fun. It's painful, don't get me wrong, but I do love it. We do both B2B sales. So we sell to employers that they should have us help them find the right employees, or they should sponsor our in person events. And then we market to folks to come to the event. So we have to master both of those motions of how we meet customers, B2B sales and direct to consumer marketing. I write a LinkedIn post every day. My day is, I'm like probably like 95%. I've missed some days, like it has happened, but I try and be really consistent about it. And that has been the most helpful thing I think I've done as a business owner, to learn how to write effective sales copy, to learn how to effectively communicate. And obviously, like, it just helps people hear about the events. It helps them learn about what we're up to. So like, I went into the business thinking distribution channels first. The way that we actually landed on this idea, I was like writing a LinkedIn post every day, searching in the darkness for what was going to resonate. And a lot of the things I wrote about helping people in their careers, about transitioning out of the military, about starting companies, like the veteran angle did resonate and was helpful to people. And we think about distribution channels through LinkedIn. We have our own channel. We've got email, right? And then we have an Instagram presence, which needs probably more tender, loving care. But thankfully, we've had an unbelievable intern over the summer named Alexis, who is like a legendary marketer. She's amazing. So she's been very helpful there. So hopefully that answers your question.
No, it definitely does. I appreciate that you've got all of these different channels that you're reaching people at, and people just hang out in different places. And I also respect that you guys have that owned piece. A lot of people just rely on algorithmic karma or whatever. Eventually, that's going to come back and bite you. So own your
Totally.
email list, people.
You have to. It's so important.
Do you think that focusing on B2B and then also B2C is hurting you guys in any way? Is that trying, you were saying you want to and need to master both of those. Is that detrimental to what you guys are doing? Because
You are
I mean, they're both hard individually.
asking the questions that keep me up at night. Thank you. I
You
mean,
didn't
it's
want to
true,
sleep
right?
tonight.
No, I didn't. It is true. You read enough business books, people tell you do less, focus more. And yeah, so do I think that we could grow more quickly by focusing on just one area? Maybe. If we only did in-person events, then we would have more time to reach out to people for sponsorships. We would be doing more cold outreach, which is obviously an incredibly important muscle, having more sales conversations. If we were only focusing on placement, that tends to be a little bit higher margin than the conference business, at least when you're small. We would be probably putting more people into specific open roles, but we would do it at the having to give up like some of the like volume of impact that I think that we can make. So ultimately, yeah, it is like hard. It's hard to know how much to focus. The pushback on that is that our business, if you think about it, is a two-sided marketplace. There's all kinds of different business models, but effectively, like, we have a marketplace of people that want jobs, people that have jobs, or sorry, are looking for employees looking to hire. And so I think that both of those things help us do that job better and serve as a better marketplace. But yeah, we're launching this new product. We're still a very lean team. And so, yeah, we'll have to see how it goes with this new product. And it does keep me up at night. The other way I justify it to myself is that I think that we will have like a very robust set of offerings for people that might want to work with us. So everything from like free resources to like paid but digital resources to attending an in-person event. Those are like different price tiers depending on what you're most interested in, which I think will be helpful. And then on the employer side, same thing, right? Like, people can advertise via our podcast, our newsletter, our conferences, or they can pay more if they need help for one specific role. So I do think that there is like some benefit to that, but yeah, I mean, it is certainly challenging and it's hard to know. Like, I would say it's probably the hardest part about running a startup is knowing how well are things working? Should this be growing faster? And if I did less, would I grow faster? And how am I going to measure my impact? Is it a revenue thing exclusively, or are there other metrics that we're holding ourselves accountable to be able to have the kind of impact that we want? There's real trade-offs to all of these different questions.
Are you guys venture backed?
We are not venture backed. So ironically, my business partner is the general partner at Context Ventures, meaning like he runs the fund. He pulled me into the fund to help as an associate on the team. Context Ventures is a fund that invests seed and pre-seed, and we invest into military veteran founders in one bucket. And then Tim also loves consumer businesses for reasons that relate to his first business. They're also just like really fun businesses, frankly. Those are distinct categories. But yeah, we are bootstrapped, and there are just certain models that lend themselves to venture backing, right? You're looking for a business that can scale to $100 million in a very short amount of time. There's a reason that like 80% of venture capital dollars are deployed into B2B software businesses, right? B2B SaaS is because that is a model that when you know that you're solving an acute pain point, you know that there's customers that can pay and like it will make them money to pay. And then you can scale that sales motion really hard and fast. Margins are fantastic. Like that is a venture scale business. But a lot of the businesses that people run, I mean, everything from bake shops to what we do as a recruiting agency to like a law firm, like they're just service based businesses. It doesn't make as much sense to apply the venture capital concept to those businesses. Yeah, I don't think we would be able to raise venture capital, nor would we really want to. It's painful. Like raising venture money is very painful and miserable. So if you can avoid it, best to do so, I think.
You really have read The Minimalist Entrepreneur. Sahil's so pro, like, not raising venture and, like, doing the bootstrap thing, and really I love that too, and I think that's cool. Another really big advocate of that path is Andrew Gazdecky, the Acquired guy.
Yep.
I love how adamant he is about bootstrapping, and I think that it's doesn't you can still have a great outcome without raising a bunch of dollars that you end up becoming a slave to.
Raising venture capital is miserable. Like it sucks. I raised money for my last startup. We had an institutional investor, we had a bunch of angel investors as well. It makes it really stressful. Like it's just stressful because you have other people's money. It's like it's a whole new layer to it. And then there's these growth targets that is like you have to move quickly. You have to. And so it just creates a series of incentives such that like founders are incentivized. Like a VC, they know that of the 20 companies that they invest in, one or two might be like a single, one hopefully is a grand slam, and that's going to return the entire fund, right? Like venture returns are incredibly concentrated in just a handful of companies and funds, right? Google, Facebook, right? Tesla, like these are like companies that have returned such inordinate amounts of money that they actually skew the entire distribution. And so a venture capitalist looks at an investment and says, is this the one that's going to return the entire fund? Or is this going to be a single or like a double? Because that doesn't really help. If my entire model is that I know that 17 out of 20 of these businesses are going to go on out of business, I have to invest only in the ones that have the chance of being that edge case, right? That can scale remarkably quickly. But yeah, so the entire model is built around the idea that like founders are going to either scale it to a unicorn very quickly or go out of business and just kind of get out of the way so that we can invest follow-on checks into the ones that are doing well, which is it's just unhealthy. And I think that our culture and society loves to lionize people that have quick wins, or you have this notion of an entrepreneur who's a visionary, sees things differently and builds something and then people love it and it's a success overnight. And that's just like very often not the case. Much more frequently, people are hustling and grinding for years and years, and they may look like an overnight success, but they're working at it for a very long time. And I think that venture capital plays to a lot of the inclinations that people have for wanting to become successful very quickly, which is just, it's challenging for a myriad of reasons. I'm happy to go into it more if it's of interest, but I'll cut myself off there.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more that I don't think that is what is needed. And the bigger challenge that I think that people ought to be thinking about is how you can make your business work with what you have. And that is, to me, at least what being an entrepreneur is. There are so many people, a lot of vets too. And I've been a part of several veteran focused like accelerators, and you talk to a lot of people that just have business ideas, but for some reason, money is somehow always the obstacle, and not
Totally.
like trying to focus on how can I actually do this without money. And I think that's why a lot of people will be successful, who those who can figure it out, and there's a lot of people who just won't.
You can always raise capital later. Like if your business is doing really well and you're like, damn, we need some money to throw gas on a fire because we are like capacity constrained. And I think this can scale really quickly. You can raise venture capital down the road. There's nothing stopping you from doing that later in the business. You could raise growth rounds where people are taking some chips off the table for you. Maybe they're buying like 20% of the company and you're able to then put some cash in your pocket, right? And they get a piece of ownership in the business. There are like other ways to do it. And yeah, the problem that people have is that they think if I can just get this to scale, then it'll work, right? I know I'll make millions of dollars when I have a marketplace that's huge or when I have this service at scale, but they can't connect the dots, right? Because you can't start every type of business with capital just doesn't work for every kind of business model. So you have to get really scrappy in the short term. An example of that, this is like my favorite example. There was a guy who pitched me on a service when I was running Paint True. The service was this. He was like, "Hey, we're going to use AI to draft you 10 different variants of advertisements. And then we're going to run them in your Facebook ads account every week. We're going to drop the lowest performers and iterate on the best performers. And over time, we'll see what the best performing possible Facebook ads are for you using AI." And I was like, "All right, cool. How much is it?" He was like, "It's $1,000 a month." I was like, "Okay, $1,000 a month. I get 10 creatives, and this guy's going to run my Facebook ads campaign. He's actually going to pay attention to it. He's going to set it up and administer it. Done." Like 100%. And I saw a bunch of the ads had words spelled. We obviously caught them when we were like editing them. They had words spelled in like British English, right? Like color with a U in it. I'm a Marine, so I don't know how to spell anyway, but someone else noticed it. And it occurred to me, I was like, this guy is probably just outsourcing this to like India or somewhere else. Like, he's probably not using AI. He's a startup. Did he code a bunch of AI? This was before OpenAI. And I just didn't care. I was like, I couldn't care any less because the job that I am paying him to do is still being done. And so I'm guessing that on the back end of him selling that to us, it was held together with duct tape and chewing gum. He was like, "Look, I'm productizing this. People are doing it manually for now, but I do know, of course, that we can build AI to do this. That is like something that's going to become technologically feasible in the coming years." And so he went to market, validated that there was a need. He got people to pay him for his product and service. And then he went out to a bunch of VCs and said, "I've generated all this revenue with no money to invest in the actual product. And it's held together with duct tape and chewing gum on the back end, but I know that there are customers looking for this solution." And then he raised a fat round doing it, right? I think that people just have a tough time separating out what is truly required, which is to make some sales. Like, you have to validate that there are customers who will pay you for your product or service, and that you know how to reach them, and that you are ready to, or you are able to consistently reach them and generate revenue. So I think most founders should focus probably almost exclusively, or at least 80% of their time, on that one specific task, which is generating sales.
You, in the course of everything that you've done since getting out of the Marines, you've talked and worked with a ton of vets in a variety of capacities, roles. You're now working in like a professional context of placing vets in addition to coaching and did the business school thing in the entrepreneurship bucket. Like the Venn diagrams are going crazy here. What are you seeing are the traits of the most successful, high performing veterans?
That's a good question. I think they are similar traits to a lot of the traits of high performers across different industries, like discipline, right? Like, it's just no matter what you do, like, you have to work a lot, like it's going to be hard. And so having the discipline and consistency to be able to continue going, I think is really important. They take care of themselves because they know it's a marathon. My boss in Iraq actually once said to us, "This is a marathon that we will sprint." Just not sure you got the saying, but yeah, in some senses, that is actually fairly accurate. But it's a long term mentality. People think with a very long term mentality. So that's very helpful. And then in the context of a specific like job search, or like for folks that are looking to get hired, the biggest indicator of someone's future performance in a role is a lot of times like their performance in the past. I see all kinds of resumes. Like, I see literally thousands of resumes. And I will tell you, the thing that always stands out to me is when it says ranked number one of 15 people, right? And then the next job you look down and it says ranked number one of 30 people. And then the next job you look down and it says ranked number one, right? You don't have to be number one at absolutely everything, but performing really well, regardless of what situation you're in, even if it's not the ideal situation, is like incredibly beneficial and helpful to your business career, right? Especially if you're going to be looking for a job. There's some kind of like philosophical aspects in there around the discipline and consistency, and then maybe some tactical advice for those thinking about resumes, or like wondering, will anyone ever care about my military service? You should be putting out, try and be competitive, try and be exceptional at your job, regardless of what you're doing, because that is going to be like the biggest indicator of your future success, is like you're the type of person that likes to win and likes to be excellent at what you do.
Knowing and accepting that most people are not in the job that they want to be, and they have this kind of aspirational thing in the future of this is where I want to be. And if only I had this, then I will be giving 100%. Completely miss the mark when it comes to understanding what it takes. Like, you need to be giving 100% at what you're doing now and do well with what you're given in order to get to that point. And I don't think that you actually can achieve your goals without doing that.
For sure. The goals also change over time too. I try and find a way to be very grateful. I don't think of myself as a successful person. You'll have to ask me if I think that in 30 or 40 years. But like having the ability to, I don't know, just get up and try and strive for excellence every day. It just really is important.
What do you think that the veteran community could only learn from you?
I knew you were going to ask that question.
Doesn't make
Um,
it any easier though, does it?
it's a hard question.
It's tough.
Like, it's a really hard question. I was brainstorming this ahead of time, so I might have cheated. I'm not this fast on my feet. There are two things that the veteran community can only learn from me. The first thing is that when you are cooking eggs for breakfast, you should scramble them very slow over low heat. Okay, that's very important. That's how you get fluffy eggs. Okay,
You don't
that's the
scramble them
first.
before? Like, you don't whip them up in a bowl and then put them in?
I actually personally don't, but if you cook them slowly over a low heat, I promise you, this is like some life changing stuff I'm giving you right now. Give it a
Thickens them
shot.
up a little bit? Okay,
Oh my, it like makes them very fluffy. I promise you, this is going to be like life changing advice for some people.
okay.
It has been for me. The second thing, I think that I can help people. I'm not sure that I'm uniquely qualified actually to teach anyone anything because I don't think that there's a ton of new ideas, but I've tried to synthesize ideas that I've stolen from others around failure. I've dealt with a lot of failure. I fail all the time, like all the time, like literally every day. And I failed at businesses in the past. I'm sure I'll continue to fail in the future every day. I think of dealing with failure or finding yourself at a point where you feel like you are a failure. I do think that this is hard advice to follow. The thing that you want to do is wallow in your misery and be upset at yourself and go inward. Right. We used to call it going internal when you're in the field and you're getting rained on and you're like, oh, woe is me. And I just want to be miserable. The most important thing that you can do for yourself is to do the exact opposite. Reach out to the people that care about you and allow them to help you, and then make as many connections as possible. There are two elements to networking and to recovering from failure, I think, that are like critically important when you think about establishing relationships with other people who can help you. Obviously, you want to have high quality interactions. Like you want people to remember it as a quality interaction. You want to make a positive impression on people. And then volume, I think, is the other piece. I think that a lot of folks go awry when they're like, yeah, I asked for help. It's, oh, great. Like, how many people did you reach out to network with? When in your transition, they're like, oh, like I talked to 7 people. That's okay. The number should be like 700. Like, you're off by orders of magnitude here. Like, as painful and challenging as it is, like when I found myself in a position where I felt like a failure and I wasn't sure what the next steps were, I just picked up the phone every day and I called every person that I knew, and then I was open to every single new connection, and I told them where I was at, and I was honest and authentic with them, and then some really fantastic things came of it. And so, yeah, reach out to as many people as possible and try and build your network and establish new relationships. And it'll do two things for you. It'll be helpful for business purposes and for figuring out what's next professionally. But equally importantly, it's good for your spirit. Like it just makes you a happier person. It makes you feel more fulfilled to connect with other people. So I don't know if that's something you can uniquely learn from me, but you get it anyway. So
I think in the context of everything that we talked about when it comes to networking, I think that is especially strong statement to be making. And from the little that I know about you from this conversation and our prior conversations, I think it's clear that you have spent a tremendous amount of time with that giver mentality. And then I just want to highlight that is probably why you can be making those calls. If you're a dick and you don't help people and you're just nobody's going to pick up the phone. So I think that's like the rough street answer of your very eloquent statement there. I love that.
you said it much better than I did.
A little rough around the edges. I'm not sure. It might be an enlisted thing. I don't know. Not as polished. I didn't go to finishing school.
Speak more clearly. That's how we should phrase it.
Brendan, I really appreciate you taking the time to download your knowledge on me today. What can myself or anybody listening do to be useful to you?
It's funny because every entrepreneur should have a good ask.
They should.
So,
I even asked you this the other day and you stuttered. You said, "Oh, I usually have an ask." And so I even teed you up. So you should have a good one.
yeah, Brock, you can keep doing what you're doing. You're doing an amazing job. This podcast is great. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on here and be able to chat with you. I'm so glad that JD introduced us. I actually learned a lot from listening to your last podcast episode. I thought it was like a pretty different format than a lot of pods that I listen to. So that was really cool. So I learned something from you already. what can you guys do to support? You can check us out. We create a lot of content on basically every channel imaginable. We've got like an Instagram. You can engage with our content on LinkedIn. It's my personal account that I primarily post on. We've got a podcast. You can check that out, but not at the expense of listening to Brock's podcast. You can subscribe to our email newsletter at themilvet.org, and then come join us at one of these in-person events. We put a ton of time and effort into them. They are incredibly high value. People have a fantastic time. It puts wind in their sails. There's a nautical term for you. And they learn a lot and they meet people that want to help them. And it's just good to be around other veterans. Like, it's just refreshing. It's fun. There's a score called a net promoter score, which is a way of measuring customer satisfaction. It goes from -100 to 100. Above 70 is considered extraordinary or like outstanding. Our events have ranked in the 90 plus for these events for a net promoter score from attendees. So come to them. I promise you'll have a good time and you'll make new friends. Those are the main asks. If you're an employer and you're looking to hire some veterans, feel free to reach out. And if I can be of service to you guys in any way, let me know. We'll have that digital membership package launching soon in the fall. So if that's of interest, feel free to reach out. And other than that, the other things that you can do if you're a veteran listening to this, build yourself a fantastic career, be of service to your country and community, and of service to your other veterans, because you have a lot to offer post-military. You are not broken. You're not a charity case. You are among the most high-performing and capable human beings on the planet. I deeply respect and admire you as a person. And so what you can do for me is to live your best life, have a ton of fun, be a great human being, and contribute back to our society.
Service doesn't stop at the end of your contract. That's for sure. That's when it's time to actually start the work. So,
Yes,
Brendan, I
that's
really
right.
appreciate your time, man. Thank you so much.
Brock, thanks for having me, man.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. Your listenership helps me better educate people like you and the rest of our nation's military, both past and present, on building a successful life outside of military service. If you're looking for more ways the top vets are leading more effective lifestyles, building businesses, and using the resources designed specifically for you, press here for a selection of some of the best clips. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date, and I will be talking with you soon.